After a few weeks, even though our clay is wrapped in the bag, it's still going to dry out a little bit. The clay becomes a bit harder. Because it's a bit harder, it's a little bit easier if you want to smooth out imperfections and model it and create some fine blended areas when we are going to model certain areas. So sometimes it's easier to do the final modeling in the last few weeks. You can see we've still got our toilet roll and our paper in the inside. What I would do is not take those out till the last possible moment, and that for some of you may be the last week. However, today we're going to work on our design for the mouth. So when we look at this design, we can see that the mouth looks like it's actually cut into the cylindrical shape. So if we put that to one side, so let's try and draw it either with a knife or with a pointed tool to make it a bit more symmetrical. So this mouth seems to come a bit more rounded like that. So as you can see, these little bits there, because the clay is a little bit drier, they're much easier to smooth out. So when we look at this design, there's two ways of doing it, I suppose. One, we could cut the whole shape first, or first we could maybe add some extra details like some lips around there and then cut the whole last. So as he's not got any lips, let's put the whole shape first. So the first thing we're going to have to do is very carefully pull out the paper. Might be a little bit wet. Sometimes you can get a bit of a tool in to be able to catch it. And then we've obviously got our toilet roll. The good thing about a toilet roll is it should collapse in on itself, twist it, and then pull it out. We still got a tiny little bit of the sellotape in the bottom. Wouldn't worry too much about that. That'll just burn off when it goes into the kiln. So let's carefully cut out the shape of the mouth, trying to make it quite symmetrical. So you can see what I've done now. I've added a few more details. So after cutting out the mouth, I've actually added a few lips onto there. Again, I could have rolled a little bit of clay out like this for the lips and stuck it down, or I could have glued it down, or I could have tried to cross hatch the back of that and stuck it down, but that would have been too difficult. So that's all I did is I cross hatched a bit of the surface of the cylinder, I glued this down with the slip, and then I added my lips around the edge like that. Then when it comes to adding sort of teeth-like shape, again, I'm just going to add one more, which I've left for you. Just going to add a bit of slip under there. I'm going to take my final tooth shape. I'm going to try and put it just in there, smooth it out. Don't have those two clays touching. And sometimes just kind of have them so they kind of just blending into the lips there. Again, I can smooth out a bit more when it dries out a little bit more. So you can see I've already added one ear on. I've made another one, and I made them both at the same time actually. So what I did is I cut one out and I turned it upside down, put it on another flat piece of clay and drew around it, so I know then they'd be exactly the same. So I'm going to put that on there. I'll just do a kind of dry fit first of all, so I think that looks quite symmetrical. So under there is where I want to add some cross hatching. So again, take my cross hatching, not too deep, but a millimetre deep, I suppose. So next, carefully trying to hold it, just line it up. Pretty happy with that. Making sure when I'm holding it, I'm not going to try to dent it. And basically, I want this joint to be quite strong. So there's two ways to do it. So I want to try to push it on quite hard, but without denting the clay, etc. I'm going to take a tool or a knife. I'm going to try to blend that in just slightly like that. Just so it looks like it's merging into the main cylinder. Alternatively, what some people do, they take a very thin piece of clay and then to create extra strength, they would just put the clay there, a bit on the front, put a bit on the back in a moment, just kind of try to push that in to create an extra area where it can join on. And just create some extra strength, making sure there's some slip behind there and chance to just smooth it out a little bit at the end. And obviously for extra strength again, I could do the same on the back. Now you can see I've added a few more bits, same technique. So looking at his design, I've added these bits on the back and quite finished the tail bit, this kind of arrow shape. How am I going to do that? I haven't worked that out yet. I've got these bits of texture which came from rolling it out onto the Hessian cloth. I might leave those. I might actually try to smooth them all carefully out. Obviously these little, now it's starting to dry, I can do that, make that quite smooth. So that's now starting to take shape. It's basically done. It's looking pretty similar to my design, but it probably needs about an hour, at least half hour, where I try to neaten up all these areas, and maybe I'll think of areas to make it slightly better. So I can see these areas, these kind of design areas, these scratches. Do they make it better? I think they make it probably a bit more interesting. The excess clay will fall out. And then it's a case of trying to see how neat you can make it. Taking your fine pottery tool and saying, right, let's try and make this a bit sharper and neater around this eye. Try and smooth certain areas out. Maybe I want to push that to a more of a point and just neaten up the edges, a bit like this. So how well you finish it will depend on your mark. Then of course some people will decide they're going to add extra features. So for example, I'm going to say, right, this looks a little bit boring. So these kind of design marks, he's put on certain parts of the face. I'm going to put some just down the side. Like that. Maybe I'm going to take another tool and just along the bottom. So that's your gargoyle pottery. Again, let's have a look. I'm going to do one more thing just to make it a bit more interesting. This to me looks a little bit boring. Over the top. Try and smooth it out. I think because it's a bit drier, I'm going to very carefully take out some almost like triangle shapes to make it a bit more aggressive looking. Clay now is quite hard. When it gets to this stage, it's called leather hard because it feels a bit like leather. So now that's looking a bit more interesting across the top. Obviously I can try to carefully smooth it out and improve the quality of the surface. That's pretty good so far. And finally, hopefully, you've got to this stage and maybe you've even got half a lesson or even a full week to improve it. So I'm going to incredibly carefully put that into the bag. Quick spray. And because now I can't wrap it very tight because of these things sticking out, it's going to dry out a little bit more. So it'll give you one more spray inside, and then very carefully I'm going to turn this around, and that should last one more week. So I need to very carefully now store that till the final week.